everyone, my name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we are going to be discussing my experience at Ropecraft Chicago 2019. For those of you who have been on my channel for a while, you may know that I did a review of my experience at Ropecraft San Antonio last year in 2018. So if you haven't seen that video and you're interested in it, please do check it out, and I think it will make for an interesting point of comparison. What I want to do in today's video is give you guys an overall idea of the Ropecraft experience, what is the format like, what to expect from classes and programming, what the dungeon is like, what to pack, what to wear, all of that good stuff. I already filmed this video once. It ended up being like an hour, so I'm going to try my best to kind of condense it and give you guys a really good detailed overview so you can decide if this is something that you might want to go to for yourself, or maybe you just like hearing about BDSM conventions and you want to know more. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, you are in the right place, and let's go ahead and get started. So, Ropecraft. What is it? It is a bondage convention. Specifically, it is a series of related conventions, somewhat like Dark Odyssey, that rotates locations throughout the year. So the big one, the one that I went to, is sort of the first one, kind of the flagship, so to speak, of the Ropecraft brand, and that is the event that happens in Chicago over Memorial Day weekend. This has been going on for at least 3 years now. Previous to that, my understanding is there was another convention called ShibariCon that I don't know anything about, because that was well before the time of my life when I had the time or ability to afford to travel for conventions, so I don't know about that, but my understanding is that Ropecraft is kind of the thing that rose from the ashes of ShibariCon and kind of tried to revolutionize, in a way, the format of the rope bondage convention. Now, for those of you who are more familiar with the wider BDSM world, you probably already know about BDSM conventions. These are things that typically have roots in the leather community, although not always, where you can go and learn about a variety of different BDSM experiences, meet people, have interesting, nights at dungeons, things like that, and they're all over the country. Now, the rope bondage world hasn't really picked up as much on this to the same degree. There are things like Bed, which is in Dallas, or Fire, which is in Florida, but besides that, there's not really a lot of options that have been going on for a long period of time that have really strong programming and have reputable presenters. Ropecraft, like I mentioned already, kind of came up from the ashes of ShibariCon, from my understanding, so that is really the role that it plays, and I would kind of liken it again to something like Dark Odyssey. In particular, how Ropecraft tries to market itself is its catchphrase is, it's the bondage convention that's not for everyone. Get it? Not. It's funny. It's a pun. And it's basically something where they try to really include as many people and perspectives as possible. So it's not just about like the traditional Japanese bondage, although that is something you can learn there, at least in that style. There is also Western bondage. There are things for self-tires, for solo bottoms, for people who have just started getting into bondage, for people who have been doing it for 30 years. So it really tries to be diverse in terms of the programming and the type of people that it wants to appeal to, rather than just being for like the hardcore Japanese style rope bondage enthusiasts, which is previously what a lot of programming has been about. Again, they mentioned things like Bed and Fire, but for the most part, the vast majority of bondage education, as it happens at least where I live and kind of in this general geographic area, is focused around the weekend intensive. Now, in terms of time commitment, that is very similar to a convention, but rather than having a format where you're taking 3 to 4 classes a day from different presenters over 2 or 3 days, you're learning from 1 or 2 people over the course of an entire weekend. And that could be one day, it could be 8 hours, it could be 20 hours, it could potentially even be longer. I've seen people even do week-long intensives before, which are more like retreats, I guess you could say. But that tends to be more of what the intense educational experience is like versus something like a convention. So it takes things like Ropecraft and Bed and Fire to be able to kind of combine these two styles together and have something that is really focused, is really specific to bondage, but is more like the format of something like a leather convention. So that's kind of an overview of what Ropecraft is like. Again, the one that I went to is the one in Chicago, which has been happening over Memorial Day weekend for the last couple of years, and it's what is called a hotel takeover style of convention. Something like Ropecraft is actually hosted at a local expo center. Most conventions, however, are the hotel takeover style, which basically means that everybody who goes there goes to the hotel, and the hotel is actually where all of the classes are happening at. And most of the time it means that the only people who are actually guests in the hotel are going to the convention. Now, it is held over Memorial Day weekend, so there's actually a little bit of additional programming going on. So it starts on Friday night, the core classes happen on Saturday and Sunday, and then the final day, Monday, is actually where a thing called Rope in Space happens, which is this really big, like, open, I don't want to call it a free-for-all because it does have a format to it. Like, basically, you go there and you say what you want to learn or teach. They put it on a board, they give you a place to do it at, and then you get to go and do all of the different classes that you want to take or that you want to teach, and you can switch places in the middle, and it's great. It's like, it's kind of the highlight of going to Ropecraft. And if you want to know more about that format, I will talk more about it later in the video, and I will also be putting links down below to Ropecraft itself, but then also kind of going over the format of those sort of more unique pieces, so to speak. So I, surprisingly enough, don't live in the Chicago area, so I actually had to fly to go there. So we actually didn't arrive until later in the day on Friday, which is when the convention started. There is registration, which is pretty normal, and you go through and you basically say, here's my ID, here's my name, I bought a ticket, give me a badge so you guys can check to make sure that I'm actually a paying member of this event when I'm walking around during the daytime and going to and from classes. And then they give you, usually a little packet. And what was interesting is this year they gave us these little baggies, and in these baggies were gray, blue, and black wristbands, and those colors corresponded that you either wanted to tie if you wanted to be tied if you wore blue. Gray meant you wanted to do the tying, and black meant not right now, please don't ask. And I thought that was really interesting because I have had similar things at other conventions. Like at KinkFest, you can buy buttons that say, I'm a top, I'm a bottom, I'm a switch, so on and so forth. And obviously if you wore the blue and the gray at once, that would probably kind of imply that you were a switch. Now, I did not take advantage of that in terms of like I'm trying to find a person to tie with, but I'm sure it was helpful for a lot of people. Now, the primary thing that happened on Friday night is there was actually a call for an art exhibition, and so they had people who were going to the event or who wanted to exhibit their art at the event basically show up, and there was like a little gallery thing, and I believe there was a performance that happened, and there was a big chocolate fondue fountain, and there was food and a bunch of other stuff. And I kind of popped my head into that for a little bit, just due to being on a plane for a long period of time and kind of feeling a little bit jet lagged and needing to reset my clock. I basically dove in, looked around real quick, grabbed a cookie, and then went back up to my room. So I can't really speak to the experience of that art space, although I did see while walking around on other days of the convention more about the art, kind of just taking it at my own pace. I think now is probably a good time to talk about what to pack and what to wear. In terms of clothing for the event, something like KinkFest I like dressing up for, because people at BDSM focused conventions, because you're going and it's more of a lecture style class, more discussion group, and then that naturally flows into the dungeon part of the night. People tend to be, at least in my opinion, a little bit more dressed up, a little bit more kink fashion forward, let's say. So when I go to something like KinkFest, I generally bring more things to kind of dress up, and I wear makeup and things like that. I do not do that for Ropecraft, and I actually don't think you need to either. You can really wear whatever you want at KinkFest. I spent 90% of my time at KinkFest in sweats, in a sweatshirt, wearing a blanket. That was my outfit for KinkFest. I was not styling. I was not being kink fashion forward. And that was great, because you know what? Everybody else pretty much wears the same thing. If you're agonizing about what to wear for rope bondage, for going to conventions, wear what's comfortable. Wear what you feel comfortable being in all day, that you feel comfortable being tied in. You can wear yoga pants, sweatpants, joggers, you can wear sweatshirts, sport bras, plenty of t-shirts. You can get dressed up if you want to, but it's about what works for you. And I think at Ropecraft there is a little bit more of that casual style to it. I did also see people wearing traditional Japanese clothing, so I did see people in hamaka, that I think is what it's called. I did see people in haori. I did see people in kimono. I don't know if I'm pronouncing those right, but I did see people wearing traditional Japanese garments. Besides that, most people were just wearing casual clothing. Most people were just wearing things that were comfortable to be in. So don't feel pressured to like, I gotta dress up and I gotta wear black and latex and leather and lingerie. You don't need to do that. You might want to bring a nice outfit for the dungeon party, but even then, most people were either naked or in their underwear. So there's really not a lot of pressure, at least at this event, to dress up in any particular way. So that's mostly what I focused on packing. I just kind of mostly focused on being comfortable, which absolutely was the right decision, because let me tell you, I was really tired most of the weekend. And this is the one point that is not something that is Ropecraft's fault, but I think is maybe important to consider when you're going to conventions. So one, the water was super cold the whole time. There was no hot tub. There was like almost no hot water. There was like 5 minutes when I was in the shower on Saturday when I had a little bit of hot water. I had a glimmer of hope. The sink would get warm water in it, but the shower wouldn't. I don't know if that was just our room, but based on like what other people said, it didn't seem like they had really hot water, which for me is so important to aftercare, is so important for general relaxation in my life on an everyday basis, that like not being able to take hot showers for an entire weekend was just like so emotionally draining. And that's such a first world problem, but like especially when it's like part of my usual aftercare routine, to not be able to feel warm is kind of messed up. Now I did pack warm clothing. I did bring sweatpants. I did bring sweatshirts. I did bring things like that. I had a blanket. So I was not necessarily like prepared for it to be as cold as it was. Now, this is something where half the people I talked to, especially the bottoms, were like, I'm cold. And the other half of the people, especially the tops, were like, I'm hot. And it's really, really hard to find a happy medium temperature where everybody is going to be okay with what's going on in the room. And all of the rooms, at least in the ballroom complex of classrooms, because there were different areas of the hotel that were used for classroom spaces. Everything in those rooms were connected. So if like room A over here is too hot and like room C over here is too cold, like it's really hard to make everybody in that shared space with only like wall dividers separating them to all be happy. So when you are packing, do be aware that there could be different levels of comfort in terms of temperature. So bring casual clothing, but bring things to wear for when it might be hot for you or when it might be cold, just to make sure that you have some consistent comfort level. But that is my spiel for talking about what to pack for the convention. Other good ideas would be to bring a water bottle. There is water available at the event, but it's so much more convenient to just be able to have a water bottle on you. Bring a blanket or towel, something to mark out the space where you're going to be tying it. Any sort of creature comforts you might want to have when you're away from home, definitely bring those as well. Any aftercare things you might need. Definitely don't forget the aftercare things if you need them, because it's so important, especially during a really intense weekend long experience like this one. But let's go ahead and get started talking about the classes and the class format. I want to spend some time talking about how to actually figure out what classes you're taking, because it is not as simple as a lot of other experiences have been, at least for me. So at places like Kinkfest, usually what will end up happening is you will get basically, a couple weeks or a couple months ahead of time, a preview of what all the classes are going to be. And there will be a calendar that shows when and where all the classes are going to be. And you usually get a copy of it in the bag that you get when you go to registration. And you have the ability to kind of just go wherever you want to in the moment or not go to anything. And it's fine. No pressure, no lines, no nothing. Ropecraft, totally different. Reason for that is a lot of the classes are focused around learning a specific rope bondage skill, so there needs to be an ability for people to go around the room to check people's progress. If you're doing something with a suspension, there needs to be a hard point where you can actually do the suspension from, and those are limited because they take up a lot of space. And so in order to combat people basically, recreating like an iPhone release scenario where everybody's lined up 10 hours ahead of time and waiting for the fabulous, oh my god, an instructor visiting from such and such who learned from master blah blah blah. they have you sign up for classes ahead of time. And how this is formatted is there's a survey that was due at least by Friday of the convention, because there weren't any classes that happened on Friday. And we had to sign up by the Friday of the weekend of the convention, basically RSVPing for the classes you wanted to go to. There was one class you could pick that was your absolute guaranteed, I am getting into this class. Everything else, you had to go through class block by class block, picking exactly which ones you wanted. Now, this does not guarantee you a spot. There's only the one that's a guaranteed spot, but it's like, this is the favorite one. This is the one that I most want to go to. And then basically through the power of like a random number generator or an algorithm or a lottery system, they would then pick who would get into what classes. And this is to, again, prevent classes that need more one-on-one time from becoming overloaded, or from people lining up really, really early before classes, just to kind of smooth everything out. In practice, this did actually really quite work out. So there was no point in time where I had to like jostle in line like I did when I was at Ropecraft San Antonio. It was so smooth, so easy to be able to get into everything. Now, there were a few classes where rather than being participants in the class, we would end up being what's called an auditor. So an auditor is somebody who's allowed in the classroom space but isn't participating and is just watching. Now, actually, at the convention itself, there was never a class where even if we were auditors, we were at least, there was never a moment at the actual convention itself where even if we were auditors, we weren't able to participate. So we were always able to at least practice what was going on, even if we didn't have necessarily like a lot of space or room to ourselves. So actually, that was actually something that worked out really well. There was never a moment where you just didn't get into the class that you wanted at all. There were classes that were standby only, but everybody who was at least on the standby list and was waiting for a standby position, everybody at least got in the room, so you could at least watch and learn even if you couldn't participate. So that actually ended up working out really well, and I'm really happy that they implemented this system. Now, the types of classes that they offered, let's make sure we talk about that as well. So there were definitely things for every level of skill set. There were things that were for people who had just started tying. There were things that were very advanced. There were partner classes. There were solo classes. There were lecture and practice classes. There were things for self-suspenders. There were things for people who were solo. There were things for rope bottoms. And those were actually the first two classes I took were focused around rope bondage bottoming, which is so important because it's something that has been missing for a really, really long time. Is basically all the education is for tops, learning how to top, and there's not really anything for bottoms. But on the first day alone, I think there were 3 classes that were just for bottoms. Not like you couldn't attend if you were top, but like that was the focus of the class, was talking about bottoming. And throughout the weekend, there were several other additional opportunities and classes for that as well. So there was definitely a lot of stuff out there for the bottoms. Both of the classes that I took, the first 2 class blocks, were really good classes. I did actually get to discuss a lot. I would not necessarily say that they were classes where I learned any new concepts, more so that I had ideas reinforced that were things that I maybe thought about but wasn't sure if other people felt the same way about them, and kind of just having a little bit more of a shared experience. The one thing that I did really take away from was this Arriving Home to Awareness, which was a packet that one of the instructors, Shakti Bliss Bunny, gave out during her class called Bhakti Bottoming. Now, this was not something where it was like a follow along to the class by any means, and if you want a copy of it, you can go to www.bhaktibondage.com and at least be able to check out her other work if you want to be able to take a look at something like this. And basically what this does is it goes over things like what mindfulness is and the nervous systems, and there is also some things that are a little bit more woo, so it does talk about stuff like chakra and energy work and things like that. But even if you are not really into the spiritual side of things, there are lots of really great little tidbits in here in terms of like questions to ask yourself to kind of get in sync and in tune with your body before you start negotiating for a scene, how to check in right before the scene starts, questions to ask as a top, questions to ask as a bottom, how to get into a mindset, coping mechanisms, breathing techniques, how to use sound, all sorts of great things. So this is really something that I very much enjoyed having. This is going to be something that I use definitely as a reference in the future. Something that came out quite a bit during the rope bondage classes that I took that were bottoming focused is this idea of connection. And I don't really have time to get into that too much in this video, so I am going to be making a follow-up to this where I talk about how to form connection in bondage, what that means, and also just like advice for connection for BDSM in general, because I don't think this is anything that's a problem that's exclusive to bondage, but a lot of people echoed this sentiment of, I like rope bondage because of the connective experience that I get to have with a partner, but I don't know how to make that happen. And there were certainly a lot of suggestions given for that in the class, whether that be with breathing techniques or with mindfulness or something else, but there didn't necessarily seem to be a lot of really concrete answers. You know, when it comes to a lot of other sort of hard things about BDSM in terms of skill, you know, sometimes all it takes is like somebody explaining, hey, you know, I have like trouble like with swinging my flogger, my arms get tired easily, and then somebody just goes, oh, well, you can use this technique to throw it instead, and it like is so much easier, and then boom, problem solved, problem done. Whereas I think connection is something that takes a lot more time to work through, but like I said, don't have time to get into it in this video. I want to be able to give you guys an overview of some of the other classes we took. So the other classes that we took during the second half of the first day of classes, which is Saturday, were more tying focused classes. So this basically gave Mr. Tex an opportunity to sleep in, which is great. I think that Tops being able to do some self-care time, especially when it's going to be a really intense weekend, is perfect. The next class we took was from Bad Kitty Bondage, who I had not taken things from before, but had heard good things about. And they were basically a throuple, not necessarily in the sense that they were three people in a romantic couple, but they taught as a throuple, which is really interesting. And it was called Shibari Surf and Turf. And it was a class that was designed around learning different ties and different ways that you can modify them. So we learned about an ebi tie, which is a shrimp tie. We learned a hog tie. We learned a reverse shrimp tie or gakyu ebi. We learned a kani or crab tie, and then we also learned a peach tie or a momo tie. So that was like a lot of information all at once. It was very accessible to a lot of different levels, and I appreciated getting to learn different versions of ties that I already kind of knew about or thought that I knew about, because I have definitely not had a lot of experience in doing things like the peach tie, because the peach tie I know is from an educator named Tiferet who has a peach hip harness tie. This was not that, so it was interesting to get to have some kind of like different ideas about like, oh, this also means this too. The last class that we took on the first day was called Diamonds Are Forever, which was from Ronin and A Delightful Pain. And this was a class that was focused around learning hishi or diamond pattern ties, specifically a chest harness and then also a futomomo, which is a bent leg tie. And those were interesting. I am not necessarily like thinking I'm going to be using either one of those two ties going forward, simply because we don't do a lot of box ties, which is what the hishi tie pattern was in, and the futomomo was just kind of finicky and didn't really offer a lot of, you know, things compared to a standard futomomo that we normally do, that I thought was better in any way. And that was basically the first day of classes. That was the Saturday day of classes. Outside of the classroom programming, there's a lot of stuff that happens at Ropecraft. There is the art gallery area, like I mentioned. There were also things like a vendor area. I was a little bit disappointed by the vendor selection. Like, there was only one person who was actually selling rope, and there were like, I think, half a dozen vendors total. I don't know if that was a space limitation thing or lack of vendor availability, or it was a cost issue, something else, I don't know. But the vendor area was like, I couldn't really write home about it. There was an interesting person who was selling chainmail pieces and like chainmail floggers, but there wasn't really anything else that I could like write home about that I feel like enthusiastic to talk about. So there was a vendor area. I didn't see that Ropecraft listed the names of a lot of the vendors on the website, although that may be updated at some point in the future. There were also special interest groups. I ended up not going to any of them simply because my energy the whole weekend was like very low most of the time, so I ended up usually going back to the room to rest between classes if I had time. Even a class actually dedicated time slot for discussion on being a person of color in the community and sharing those experiences, and that was something that was good, I think, probably for both people who were allies and then also people who are people of color within the community. So I thought that was interesting. There were also like a big photo area, so you could actually get professional bondage photos taken at the event. Really quickly here, I do want to mention in terms of photos at the event, this is something that's also kind of a quirk of at least the bondage convention experience. So places like KinkFest, it's like no phones out, your phone has to have blue tape over all of the cell phone screens, no taking pictures of anything at all ever. No, you will be kicked out, it's bad, don't do it. Whereas at Ropecraft, they're kind of like, yeah, have your phones out, take pictures of things, don't cover your cell phone, just make sure you have the permission of everybody involved in the photo to be in the photo. And if you don't have the permission of somebody to be in a photo, don't take their picture. So it's very much more of an honor system, which I think is actually helpful because when you are learning complex ties that take an entire 2 hours to learn how to do, it is really nice to be able to take those photos and remember what the hell you learned, because chances are you're going to learn 8 other things this weekend, and being able to remember all of the little finicky elements that are specific to this one and only tie. I don't expect anybody to be able to retain that information, and being able to take photos of that and your experiences over the weekend is a pretty nice advantage, although they do also have professional photographers there. And you do have the ability on your badge to basically put on a little thing that indicates whether or not you are comfortable having your photo taken, and the professional photographers that are there won't take your photo depending on what basically your badge indicates to them that you are comfortable with. So that's just a little aside about photography there. Obviously, the really big reason why people go to events, at least for me, this is something that makes or breaks going to a convention, is the dungeon experience. So let's go ahead and talk about that next. So the dungeon actually changed a little bit from night to night. They had the big ballroom, which was originally set up as class spaces, and they actually kept it very, very similar for the party on Saturday night, which is they basically had like dungeon area A, dungeon area B, and dungeon area C, and they were still separated by those room dividers, and each one of them had their own music playing in them, which I thought was great because music, especially in bondage, makes a huge difference in the mood and the atmosphere and what you actually feel like playing like. So that is something that I thought was a big positive, was having those different spaces. And it also allowed different scene energies to kind of commingle, so you could have one room where people were having sex and bondage at the same time. And then you could also have a room where people were kind of doing more heavier play, we're doing impact play at the same time as the bondage, and then you could have just like the pure bondage area. And I like that they had that separation. And I really liked being able to do that. We did not really do a lot at the dungeon, simply because, again, energy levels were kind of low. We did end up doing a suspension for about 30 minutes, and then we decided it was time to go to bed, and yeah, that's basically what we ended up doing on the dungeon on Saturday night. I thought the DJs were pretty good on the first night. I like how they had everything lit. I like the atmosphere. Basically, your only options were like 2 spanking horses and like 24 pagodas, and if you didn't like one of those things, then you wouldn't play at them. So yeah, that's basically what there is to say about the dungeon space. It was definitely a lot more closed in, a lot more personal, because each room really only had maybe like a dozen at the most rigs in it for suspension, so it was a little bit more intimate, it was a little bit more closed off, but the event overall is a lot smaller, so that also kind of makes sense as well. Moving on to the last formal day of classes, that was Sunday. It was very similar. So each day had a block of 4 classes, and that would start at 10 a.m. and go until 6:30, which I actually liked format-wise, because even though you were staying out later doing the classes, it gave a lot of opportunity to get breakfast and sleep in and do self-care. Still get ready before the dungeon, especially because it was in the same hotel, so you didn't have to travel and then come back and do all that stuff. So that actually, I think, format-wise, worked out really well. I didn't take any additional bottom focused classes when I was there on Sunday. This was primarily more of a pattern tying class block. Again, I would say I definitely did a lot more of that. In terms of classes, I'm looking at my phone to remember all of the exact titles of everything. There was one called Tsuki Shibari, which is another pattern tie. It's a box tie. And it's basically the kimono string tie is what it's called. I really like the presenters of this class, and they were Ojipan, and I cannot remember the bottom's name, but Ojipan was the name of the presenter. And I liked their class format. I thought they were good instructors, and I would certainly take something from them again. The next class that we took was actually my favorite one of the entire convention. This one was from Rocket and Blissey, and it was called Patternless Groundwork for Play. And I think, especially having taken those bottoming focus classes at the beginning of the convention, I was really in a mindset where I was thinking a lot about my relationship to bondage and what I enjoyed about the bondage experience, and I really like patternless groundwork. Is it fun to spend 35 minutes getting a harness on and going up in the air and then putting on another harness and then being suspended from that and then changing position and then coming back down and having aftercare and having that routine all the time? Yes, that can definitely be fun. I'm not knocking on that by any means, but being able to have something that is truly an organic, connective, shared experience like that, where it's not just like I'm focusing on completing this exact pattern, because if I screw up this one thing, this person could literally have a traumatic injury from it. Like, it is good to be able to have those times where you can do something that's more organic, that's more free flow, where you get to really experience what your own style is like. And so they did a great job facilitating the class, just kind of like being real and honest about their experiences and their kinks. Like, they were very funny, very like easy to be around, and yeah, I would definitely go back to that class, and I hope to see those presenters again. Now, the next class that we took after this was another pattern tie. This one was called the Widow Harness, and rather than being a box tie, this was actually an arms front tie, which is supposed to be more sustainable. However, it's a lot more pinchy to put on, and it's a lot more finicky simply because of the design of it in order to avoid being overly bulky. Again, I like the instructors. The tie was interesting. Not something I'm really planning on using again in the future, but at the least was an interesting concept, and I'm glad I had the experience of getting to learn more about what that was like. Now, the last class was probably the one I was looking forward to the most. This was Shay Tizano of Shay and Stefanos fame, and she taught a class that was called the Arms Free Chest Harness Variety Pack. So Shay is primarily known as a self-suspender. That's her main thing that she does. She also does performances and some like partner ties and things like that, but she primarily does self-suspension. So all of these things where the arms are tied up in the front or behind the back or at the sides, she doesn't really do that. Not really a thing that she includes in her bondage. It was really nice to get the opportunity to go to a class where we could vote and learn the non-arms involving chest harnesses that we actually wanted to learn. And even though it was the very, very end of the convention and everybody had their brains fried from having learned so much over the rest of the weekend, you know, it was a really great class atmosphere. The ties were actually ones that I am planning on probably using again in the future. This is definitely something that I think we took a lot away from. And honestly, like, I have sung the praises of Shay and Stefanos time and time again, and I think if you are wondering if something is going to be for you or not, and you want somebody who's a really great presenter who actually knows what they're talking about, Shay is fantastic. I would not hesitate to recommend going to one of their events, and if you are local to the San Francisco area, I would definitely check out their stuff there as well, because they do teach a lot locally in addition to going to conventions. And that was basically everything that happened in terms of classes. So the next thing that I really want to talk about is the dungeon on Sunday night as opposed to Saturday night, because this definitely changed. I don't know why they did this. I don't know if this was the plan all along or what happened, but rather than doing the segregated rooms like they did previously, they opened everything up into one giant maze of suspension rigs. And so there were like dozens of rigs all in one room with some mats and some spanking benches thrown in and one DJ to control the whole space. And this is really the element I have to complain about, because it wasn't necessarily that there was anything wrong with having a bunch of people in the same space, because that's how Kinkfest does it, but the energy was just like totally wrong for what we wanted to do in the dungeon on that night. Like, they were playing Judas Priest, and like, that's fine, I will get down to some Judas Priest. I will do impact play to Judas Priest. I will not, however, do a ballroom dance inspired partial suspension scene to Judas Priest. Having the first couple minutes just be like speed metal was not the thing I was thinking of when I negotiated that scene. Luckily, I don't know if the rope gods answered, I don't know if the DJ heard us complaining and laughing to each other about it, but after the last metal song was done, they switched over and basically did like modern swing music and jazz. I don't know if something happened over the event where they had a plan, like first half of the night is this energy, second half of the night is this energy, or whatever, but it was so much better once they changed it. And I wish there was some ability like they do for Kinkfest to like give the DJ input on to what kind of music you want to listen to, because I feel like that would have made it so much better. Or better yet, make it so everybody can have the kind of music they want for their scene. Do the separated rooms. Maybe it makes monitoring and things a little bit more difficult, but if you were already able to do so successfully the night before, why not continue doing that experience? I don't know. There is one more part to this event, because it's not just classes and dungeon nights. For actual Memorial Day on Monday, they have a thing called Rope in Space, which I mentioned at the beginning of this video, which is a basically self-made day of teaching different types of classes. You have the ability to basically have facilitators and this giant board help you be able to figure out what class you want to teach, what you want to learn, and when you want to learn it, and where you want to learn it. So they had like this giant board with times and locations, and at the beginning of the event, kind of like the opening ceremonies, sort of, everybody who wanted to have a specific thing that they wanted to teach or learn would go up and write down, here's what I want to teach, here's what I want to learn, here's the time slot I'm doing it at, and the location, and then it would be up on a board, and then you could decide what classes you wanted to go to. And this is a great opportunity for people who maybe are thinking about teaching but don't really know how to get started, or people who want to review things from earlier in the week with other people who they were in classes with, people who just have a topic they're really passionate about. Like, it is really a, like, whatever you want to do, week will help you make that happen, which is so great. And in particular, we ended up teaching class on animal capture net suspension. We got to kind of talk about that for like 30 minutes and show people how to do it. And I actually got to meet some of you while doing this, which was great. And hi, hello, welcome if you're watching this video. And it was so much fun, and we had never really done something like that before, so it was interesting to get to kind of try that out for the first time. Honestly, if you're not sure if like a convention experience is right for you, I would highly recommend trying out an experience like this just to get to try this, because it is such a great way to have a really customized experience where you are not feeling guilty about like staying in a class, because you can just move and go somewhere else. You get to teach and talk about the things you want to talk about as long as you want to talk about them with, and I think that is so great. Also, they had an introvert corner, which is fantastic. They also had a lot of inflatables like in general during the event, which I thought was an interesting touch. Oh my god, this is such a long video. I am so sorry. Hopefully you got something out of this. Hopefully this helped answer some questions for you. If you have anything else you want to know about with Ropecraft or my experience at Ropecraft, you can leave comments down below. Links to everything as well in the description, as well as my previous video talking about Ropecraft San Antonio. If you like this video, if you want to see my follow-up video where I'm going to be talking about connection and BDSM, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. I make videos twice a week. And finally, if you really like this video, if you want want to see photos from the event when they're ready, if you want to be able to catch up with my everyday experience, have exclusive access to extra photo shoots, extra videos, things like that, best way to do that is over on Patreon, which I will link to down below, as well as showing up on the screen here pretty shortly during the outro. If you do already support me on there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you guys next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.